and welcome to Finextra TV. I'm Angelica Malin, coming to you from Sibos 2023 in Toronto. Today I'm talking with iPiD, and Damien and Alain from iPiD are going to be speaking to me today about their recent EBA Day success and what they're doing with their pioneering fintech company. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
So as I mentioned, you recently won a contest at EBA Day. Can you tell me a little bit about that win and what your company is doing now? If you could fill us in since the win, what's happened?
For sure. Let me maybe go first and then I'll let Alain complement later. So we actually spoke to Finextra last year at Sibos in Amsterdam. And so let me maybe give you a quick reminder on what we do and what has progressed since then, including the win in Madrid last June. So what do we do? What we do at iPiD is that we make cross-border payments as safe and error-proof as domestic payments. If you look at the domestic payment space, we've seen a lot of innovation with services like the confirmation of Payee in the UK or account validation services, which essentially enable the payer to get that real-time validation that the payment will be successful because the account number is correct, but also the confirmation that they're paying the right person, so that the name that they've written, that they've provided, matches with the name in the banking records of the receiving bank. So that's what we do. We create the interoperability, we interconnect, we aggregate all those domestic confirmation of pay services. What has changed since last year? A lot. So we have grown our coverage very significantly. We cover today around 2.5 billion accounts globally across 4 continents. Again, through that single API that access account validation services in all those countries. And we've also seen that the topic has grown in importance. Probably one of the reasons why we won the awards in Madrid, proving that we're solving a real problem of preventing failed payments, preventing frauds for cross-border payments. And we see in this conference today that it's one of the top 3 topic at the conference, and the industry is moving from awareness to action.
Fantastic. It sounds like there's been a lot of progress since that win last year.
Yeah.
A lot of exciting things. And you recently published a white paper on the future of confirmation of Payee in Europe. Can you tell me a little bit about the white paper? What were some of the challenges you were trying to look into and some of the findings?
So the thing is the following, right? If you look at the way that the financial or the payments industry has evolved over the last 20 years in Europe, there's a lot of investment being poured into this, essentially also because the industry wanted to leverage the creation of the euro currency, the single currency in the country, and in doing so by building market infrastructures that would be using the most of the single currency, but also regulating in such a way actually that all these payments that flows across Europe can be actually fully secure, seamless, and really responding to the need of the citizens. And therefore from there you've had regulations like the SEPA one being created, but also you have actually a series of market infrastructures at the payment level or the securities level, the so-called T2 or the so-called EBA clearinghouse or the so-called T2S TIPS. All these infrastructures have been designed to fully leverage the power of having a single currency. That has been fantastic, and you see it's actually really happening throughout the continent. The problem is that over time it led also to some, let's say, side effects. Good effect is clearly a lot more real-time payments, push payments, all of that is great, but it led also to the side effect of having a lot more fraud. The new regulation that's going to come very soon, normally by the end of the year, is designed not only to fight against this, it's also designed to making sure that real-time payments will be actually really used across Europe everywhere in all countries, but also making sure that if it is used, there's proper mechanism to making sure that it doesn't lead to more fraud as we see nowadays. And part of those measures that the regulations wants to force is precisely mandating the account validation. Exactly what Damien was explaining is that the payer should be sure when he sends a real-time payments that the person or the company is paying to is actually the right person or the right company.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. And what perspective did it give you on new regulatory layers in Europe?
So the way we see it is because obviously the legislation is coming, all right? I mean, again, it's going to be approved very soon. Then from there, I think the industry has to decide also on how they're going to be doing this, right? So defining the rules in order to operate actually the requirements that the legislation is actually putting forward, right? We call that a scheme. Typically, if the industry wants to validate the information of the payee, they need to decide actually upon which criteria, which data point, and how they're going to be doing this, right? There is actually an association in Europe called the EPC, the European Payment Council, that is now actually mandated to define this. And that's going to happen over the next few months, few quarters. Once you have that, therefore you can actually start creating the operators or the companies that will be operating the scheme we were talking about, right? What we see now happening in Europe is that, well, you would argue that we are a single region or a single currency, but likely you're not going to have a single system, right? I mean, Europe is about 27 countries, if I count them well. Likely you're going to have actually perhaps not 27s, but some countries will develop their own account validation mechanism and operations. Some others may join their force together, but ultimately what will be very much important is to create an interoperability mechanism in between all these systems, so that if you pay from Spain, as an example, to somebody else in Finland, you're sure actually that you can have access to those information and be sure that you're paying again to the right person or the right company. That is also what iPiD is designed for, is actually to support this interoperability. So basically we see ourselves in two missions. One is eventually to operate some of those systems that are more domestic, and two, interoperate and interconnect those systems so that the flows can be really seamless from one country to another one.
And what is the global potential of confirmation of payee as you see it?
Yeah. So building on what Alain has just mentioned, I think there are different levels. The first, probably most urgent need is for all countries that don't have a scheme or don't have a solution at the moment to build one. Europe is doing it because of the new regulation. Countries like New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, even the US, they're still lacking that essential feature and service. And so we believe that the first level is that every country has its own solution. And probably they will also start enriching their services to go beyond just name checking, but also applying analytics and returning fraud signals and things like that. And so we want to be part of that as either an operator or even just sharing expertise in the market. So fraud is one thing, but I mean, just to share one data point about sort of a random country, Philippines, I came across that last week. More than 100,000 of domestic payments in the Philippines every month failed, needs to be corrected because someone, mistyped the account number or things like that. So that's around 1 to 2% of the domestic payments in the Philippines that just go wrong. And account validation helps to prevent that beyond fraud, just to avoid these kind of issues. Next step will be cross-border. And again, from a fraud perspective, if we manage to reduce the risk of fraud domestically, then fraud will move cross-border, move to cross-border payments. And that's what Alain has mentioned. Our role is to provide that interoperability at the global level to prevent failed payments, which actually are happening even more often than for domestic payments. Around 5 to 10% of cross-border payments fail because of incorrect banking details, and also preventing fraud on a global basis. So that's the potential, that's the future.
Okay, well, thank you so much for talking with me today. I wish you the best of luck in this important work that you're doing. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, pleasure.
Thank you,
very
Angelica.
much. Thank you.